Hello, hello, hello. Welcome or welcome back to Lilies and Tomatoes. Tonight we're going to be talking about choosing things to grow in your 5x5 garden. If we have not met yet, my name is Quincy Adams and I want to help you grow some of your own food in a small space on a budget. Let's get started. Okay, so 5x5 garden is what I call a garden that I recommend for new gardeners. It's 5 5-gallon containers. It is a great place to start with a garden. Last week we talked about some vegetables to put in a 5x5 garden. I showed you how to plant them. And then we talked about how you keep your plants alive. Now I want to talk to you guys a little bit about like choosing the plants that you're going to grow in your 5x5 garden. And so there's like 5 things that I think you should consider when choosing those plants. I am bumping my camera. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so one, if you're new to gardening, you should grow annuals. Annuals do not last for don't live for an entire year. They're generally going to live within their season with the best temperatures and like optimal conditions for them. So it's going to be somewhere between generally 3 and 9 months for most annuals. So that's a lower commitment time. So if you're new, I don't want to discourage you from trying to go big, but like if you really are not sure if you can keep a plant alive for a year or 2 years with a perennial, go for something that's an annual that's going to have a lifespan of closer to 3 months. And that way, once you get some like growth time under your belt, you'll feel more confident and then you can go for something else. So 2, go for things that have a similar growth style. And by that, I mean things that are small. So you want things that on the label of the plant says something like container friendly, it says mini, it says dwarf, determinate, bush, something that indicates that it's going to be a smaller plant. So that way, if you need to move your garden around, it's easier to grow. It's easier to move and it's not going to get super tall. You might not have the space to go vertical with your garden. So in that case, you want to make sure that you're getting all compact plants. If you do have the space to go vertical, like say you're out on a deck and you can go all the way up the wall, then go all the way up the wall and get a bunch of binding stuff. That's awesome. But if you don't, get like bush cucumbers, bush beans, determinate tomatoes, things like that. Things that say small, mini, container friendly, dwarf, determinate, bush. Those are all going to be smaller plants. 3, you want to get things that are all growing in the same season. And when I say season, I mean based on like the temperature that's going to be optimal for them. So cool weather veggies or normally spring or fall veggies are going to be things like peas and broccoli and cabbage. Those are things that prefer cooler weather. So if you want to grow 5 things in your 5 containers and peas are on your list, then you should go for all cool weather things and grow them all at the same time. If you're growing things like tomatoes and peppers, those are summer vegetables, they need warmer temperatures. So you're going to want to go for something that, like more things that can handle the heat, so they can all be grown at the same time. And that leads us into number 4, which is plant all of them at the same time. If you're going to go for 5 container garden, don't plant one and then wait a couple weeks and see what happens. It's best to just plant them all at the same time so you get into the routine of checking them all at the same time. Because if you buy plants at the same time, but you don't up-pot them all at the same time, they're not going to survive in the little plastic pots that came in from the nursery. Unless you're growing a couple things from seed, then in that case, like you can pull some beans or peas out of your pantry and put them in a pot. That's okay to start a little bit early because those are going to take a little bit to germinate. And 5, don't go for anything that's super high maintenance. High maintenance, like generally tomatoes are considered high maintenance, even though I love tomatoes. Tomatoes do require a little bit of time and effort to maintain them, prune them, keep them upright. Even if you're getting a determinate tomato, it's still going to be a decent sized plant. But don't get anything that needs to be like watered every single day, that needs to be in certain special kind of soil that you may or may not be able to find, particularly if you're looking at the end of the garden season. For when I say garden season in this sense, I mean like generally March, April time till about August, September. A lot of like the big box type stores, they don't plan on having garden items on like around all year round. So they only order enough for what they think it's going to last. So they have a couple sales at the beginning of the season to get people in the door. They'll have a couple sales around holidays in the middle of the summer. But at the end of the season, what they got is what they got. They're not getting any more till next year. I just went to Home Depot the other day to look at what soil they had. They had a whole lot of potting mix and no potting soil because it's the end of the season. Are they ordering more potting soil before the end of the season? No, because it's a seasonal item. When it's gone, it's gone. So those are my 5 suggestions for picking things that you can grow or that you should grow in your 5x5 garden. I will give you a list of things that you can grow in a 5-gallon container, and I will show you one of my plants that I brought in just so you can see something different than the pepper that I kept bringing inside. So things that you can grow in a 5-gallon container: peppers, tomatoes. I would recommend a determinate and a cherry tomato. Just because with a determinate tomato, it's not going to get as tall. Cherry tomatoes, they're lightweight, so if you have to move your container, they're less likely to go scattering across the floor, or if they're not going to break your plant if you have to move them because they're not as heavy on the plant. Bush beans, leafy greens, potatoes, spring onions, carrots, radishes, cabbage, broccoli, garlic, leeks, zucchini, cucumbers, peas, strawberries, blueberries. So all of those things do well in a 5-gallon container. I would also suggest, if you're thinking about like you want to mix it up a little bit, but you don't want to get too crazy yet, then grow a couple of things that may not be common in your area, but are still common among gardeners. And that's when my friend comes in. So this is a ground cherry. This plant is in a 5-gallon bucket. It's not that tall. It's just one, but it's got a cool, it grows fruit in little lanterns, and they're a nice, sweet little treat. This is something that I planted just so I can have snacks in my garden. I did not plan on doing anything more with these because my first set, I only had one that germinated, so I've got some more going, but now it's August. But as you can see, there are plenty of fruit on here. So usually what I do is I go out in the morning when I go check on my plants. They'll fall off when they're ripe. So when they fall off, then I'm just like, okay, I've got my little breakfast treat. I am going to take one off of here because it looks like it's almost ripe. So this one right here, this is the lantern that they grow in. This is a ground cherry. So if you're looking for something that's slightly unusual to grow, then ground cherry is definitely something you should consider. You can get fruit with one plant. I'm doing it. It's best if you have 2 if you want a lot, though. And this is one of those fruits where if it's not ripe, it could make you sick. So just be careful. I love them, but they're not for everyone. But that's just one of the things you should consider. 2, okra. 3, sorrel. 4, mosh. And 5, tomatillos. So those are things that are like not quite the standard. Everybody grows these things, but they're common enough that if you want to grow them, you should be able to find plants around. So ground cherries are a husk fruit. Tomatillos also are a husk fruit, but they are larger and they're great in salsa. If you have a lot of ground cherries, you can definitely freeze these, can these, make jellies out of them, whatever it is that you want to do with a fruit. Trying to get part of this partially in without covering my face. Okra is a vegetable that's mostly eaten in the South. Okra is very prolific if you plant it. The plant does get pretty big, but it will be limited in size based on the size of the container that it's in. So that's a plus. And you can eat that fried, or if you're brave, eat it raw. Me and okra are not friends, but it is something that a lot of people like. 3, sorrel, that is a leafy green. It is perennial, and it tastes a little lemony or a little bit like Granny Smith apples. I actually grow a lot of sorrel, and I use it in smoothies. So I put it in like fruit-based smoothies, something sweet, and I think it's delicious. 4, mosh, that is another leafy green, but that's something that is very, very cold hardy. So that's something that you would want to grow over the winter if you wanted to keep your garden growing over the winter. If you're, I think it's hardy to zone 3, down to zone 3. So that means it can withstand very cold temperatures. And then tomatillos are warm weather fruit, just like the ground cherries, but they're more for salsa. So those are my 5 suggestions for things you should consider when you're planting a 5x5 garden, a list of different things that you can grow in a 5x5 garden, and another list of 5 things that are a little bit out there, but still common enough that you can find some plants around. So to recap, things you should consider: 1, plant annuals, because they're going to have a lifespan that's between 3 and 9 months, and it's a lot easier to maintain a plant for 3 to 9 months than it is to start with a perennial if you don't know what you're doing. 2, grow things that are similar growth style. So it's small plants, container-friendly plants, dwarf, mini, bush, and determinate. Those are the things that you'll see on the label. Those are all smaller plants, grow all similar things. It'll make your life easier. 3, grow things that are in the same season for plant-wise. So if you're planting cold weather crops, plant all cold weather crops in the cold weather season together. If you're growing summer crops, do all summer crops at the same time. It's just easier when you're getting started to keep things the same. 4, plant everything at the same time. Don't wait and see. Don't buy seedlings and then think that they're going to survive in those little plastic pots. Just pot them all up at the same time. And 5, don't get anything that's super high maintenance because it can get away from you very quickly. All right. And then the list of things that you can grow in a 5-gallon pot. And this is not a complete list. This is just a list of things that I come up with off the top of my head. Peppers, cherry tomatoes, bush beans, leafy greens, potatoes, spring onions, carrots, radishes, cabbage, broccoli, garlic, leeks, zucchini, cucumbers, peas, strawberries, and blueberries. And then 5 things that are a little bit out there that you might want to think about: brown cherries, okra, sorrel, mosh, and tomatillos. Are there any questions? I don't see any questions. So I want to remind you guys that I wrote a book, and the book is available on my website right now. It is just going to give you all the basics, things you need to get started. So it's going to be like, what containers do you need? Where do you get those containers? How do you plant the plants? What plants should you get? And how do you keep those plants alive? So it's just like everything you need, basic, get started. I'm not going to overwhelm you with anything fancy. This is just like, if this is the bare minimum I need to get started, to get a garden growing. This is a container garden for small space. This is your go-to guide for that. If you want something a little bit more out there, I've got more books coming, but this is the first one. And I still don't see any questions, so I will let you guys go for tonight. Oh, I forgot, almost forgot. If you want to get free Glad bulbs from Andre from Firefly Farm and Mercantile, make sure you send him an email at Andre at fireflyfarmandmercantile.com and arrange to pay the shipping for the free gladiola bulbs from this spring that he is giving away. And if you want to buy bulbs for fall or seeds for your garden, because I'm starting to see chatter in my gardening groups that people are not able to get the seeds that they want, then check out fireflyfarmandmercantile.com. There is a 5% discount for everyone in the Lilies and Tomatoes community. The discount code is Lilies, Lilies. And Andre is a wholesaler, so he sells seeds from a bunch of different companies. And if the seed is available to be put on sale, it's on sale on his website. So you're already getting it on sale. Plus, you're getting the 5% discount if you use the code Lilies, Lilies at checkout. And since I don't see any questions, then that's it for tonight.